How to deal with an atheist megalomaniac. So this will be a somewhat different video than my usual fare, responding to this individual here, a TikToker going by the name of @ATHEIST. On YouTube, he's apparently part of the Axioms on Trial channel. Before getting into the nitty-gritty, a quick disclaimer. The title of this video is not meant to disparage atheists or atheism in general. Rather, it serves to highlight a fundamental problem within the atheist community, one that this TikToker @ATHEIST exemplifies. Just as there are slews of mentally troubled and unhinged religious folk, so too are such afflictions present amongst various atheists. Contrary to the kooky religiosos, whose absurdities arise from ignorance and fear, derangement in atheist circles stems from intellectual fragility. This fragility, as in the case of @ATHEIST, often turns pathological, provoking a constant need to demonstrate intellectual superiority over others on matters related to atheistic positions. A condition that approximates this pathology is megalomania, where an individual not only develops delusions of superiority, but incorporates such delusions into their existential integrity. Thus, when these delusions are challenged and shattered, as occurred with @ATHEIST, they experience a fundamental attack on their personhood, causing them to lash out with desperate projections, deflections, and personal attacks, including veiled threats of violence. What follows is a comprehensive refutation of @ATHEIST's posted videos on this issue, including a dissection of his initial failed rebuttal to my argument. But first, a quick background on how we got here. I posted this video regarding belief in God, presenting the strongest possible argument justifying such belief. If you are interested in watching it, there is a link in the comments below. I politely invited this TikToker @ATHEIST, an atheist who regularly streams live, to check the video out when he had time. The first thing he posted on the video, which he has since deleted, was, "This is a terrible argument. No civil or intellectual engagement, no rational inquisitiveness, just immediate open hostility and aggression." But this was just the beginning. After posting a multitude of comments and videos about the argument and realizing that he had no valid retort against it, he degraded into a manic fury, spewing direct ad hominem personal attacks. "You're delusional. You are a weakling," followed up by streams of direct messages with veiled threats of violence, namely, "You should not exist." And keep in mind, this is just a fraction of the projected hysteria from @ATHEIST. The vast majority of his comments and messages have since been removed by him, me, or TikTok. I only decided to make this video response after he began projecting his threats onto me, falsely accusing me of the same. Otherwise, I would have saved every demented post he wrote. This is not an isolated occurrence for Mr. @ATHEIST. His TikTok is littered with aggressive confrontation, condescension, and general acrimony against anyone who disagrees with him, not to mention the countless videos from other TikTokers responding to his sadistic malice. His MO is always the same. Whenever he loses an argument or runs up against any serious opposition, he degrades into open insults and mockery. And when his opponents object, he falsely accuses them of projecting and being delusional. When that fails, his depravity leads him to racism and even mocking the mentally handicapped. This is the megalomania that plagues parts of the atheist community. When they cannot satisfy their need for intellectual dominance, that is, when they realize that they have lost a fundamental debate, they experience a sort of mental collapse or psychotic break, leading to crazed hostility and violent verbal abuse. An analogous existential crisis occurs among some religious people. When they fail to rationalize or justify their baseless religious convictions, they resort to open or veiled threats of hell for non-believers, or worse. None of this is too surprising, given how much these individuals are invested in their worldviews. Similarly, when @ATHEIST realized that he had no defense for his position, his coping mechanism was to attack and threaten me, and then project that onto me to escape accountability. There are generally two ways one can respond to such attacks: ignore them, or, as I prefer, to return their hostility tenfold. There should be no place for such demented aggression in civil discourse. It should be mercilessly challenged and dissected at every turn, until it collapses in on itself, undone by its own vehemence. That is exactly what happened with @ATHEIST, and this video response will serve to make an example out of him for the benefit of anyone who comes across his channel or mine, or, in other words, exposing the toxicity that plagues atheistic discourse. Civility is a two-way street, kiddo. The moment you fail to reciprocate it, one has every right and reason to return fire against your self-serving animosity. You're going to learn to take loss maturely. You're going to learn that it's not okay to call people delusional and weakling every time you lose an argument, even when it renders your worldview as categorically unreasonable. You're going to learn that it's not okay to vomit up depraved attacks whenever someone refutes your perspective, only to then play the victim to escape responsibility for those attacks. You're going to learn all of this, and I will teach you. This is for everybody, Mr. ATHEIST to know. All the TikTokers you've abused and demeaned on here to gratify your overgrown ego. I've tagged all of them to this video so they can witness the disintegration of a disgraceful megalomaniac. I asked you numerous times to apologize for your degeneracy, to retract your projections of such degeneracy onto me in your recent videos. You refused. No problem. You have every right to express yourself in such manner, if you wish, and I have every right to tear your expressions apart with basic reason. And now, let's get into the aforementioned dissection of ATHEIST to know's depredations, beginning with his initial response to my substantive argument. By the way, I responded to his videos in the comments section, but he then decided to block me to avoid further debate, justifying the block by falsely accusing me of threatening him. He then attempted to save face by asking me to debate him live, all while continuing to spew vile invectives and refusing to apologize for his outbursts and threats. Amazing strategy.
So, first of all, the moment that you talk about something being beyond logic and beyond reason, you've already lost.
No, actually, I haven't, and I'll explain the concept to you as simply as possible. There is nothing unreasonable about the concept of existential phenomena beyond our comprehension. That is, potential phenomena that are beyond logic. For example, a fruit fly has no ability, and never will have the ability, to conceive of calculus, much less understand calculus. But this does not mean that calculus does not exist. Similarly, we can speak on the concept of existential phenomena that are beyond our comprehension. Unlike the fruit fly, which cannot even conceive of the idea of things beyond its understanding, we can. There is a distinction between the concept of something beyond comprehension versus discussing the nature or attributes of such a thing. The former is perfectly rational, while the latter is entirely irrational. Most religions, or at least the Abrahamic ones, exercise the latter, which is why they are ultimately unconvincing. The argument in my video, however, has nothing to do with religion. Thus, by stating you have already lost, you are not only unequivocally incorrect, as I just explained, but you are not making any actual counter-argument. You're merely stating no, that is wrong, which is empty rhetoric. This is tantamount to concession. Your misunderstanding of these concepts is further reflected in one of your videos regarding the presupposition of logic. You don't seem to understand that logic is 100% presupposed. Presupposition does not have to be a conscious act. It can be a foundational element that defines a given system, such as human thought. The only way we can avoid presupposing logic is if it is established as absolute, which is unattainable due to circularity. But this is mostly academic to the argument here. Whether or not you claim logic is presupposed, we still reach a paradox upon analysis of existential origins, which in turn leads to the God concept. At no point have you provided any counter to this whatsoever other than screaming no, no, no and projecting your hostility.
Because at that point, you're not providing an argument anymore, you're just making statements. To say that God is where logic comes from is just a claim.
No, I provided the argument about why the concept of existential phenomena beyond our comprehension, that is, beyond logic, is not only rational, but follows from logical analysis of the origins paradox. At this point, you're projecting your absence of an argument onto me to deflect from your inability to provide a meritorious retort, a tactic you use repeatedly throughout your videos to baselessly reassert your untenable perspective. In other words, you're again screaming no, no, no over and over while pretending to have provided a valid counter. Intellectual dishonesty is not a good look, bud.
And I have no reason to accept that claim.
I provided the reason why the claim is justified, that is, why it should be accepted. Not only did your rebuttal fail to provide any valid retort, but it is presently being systematically disintegrated. Lying about this to sidestep your lack of rational rejoinder doesn't change anything.
Second, atheism doesn't need to answer any questions about origin. Atheism is a reasonable conclusion due to your failure.
This is a straw man, one of many. I never said atheism has to answer anything. I presented the argument why theism is a more reasonable position than atheism. Projecting your failure to counter this does nothing.
To actually provide any credible reasoning for theism.
I provided exactly such credible reasoning for theism. Merely stating you have not provided credible reasoning is not an argument. It is just a dressed-up way of screaming no again. Learn to admit when you're wrong about something or when you do not have a valid argument, as opposed to spewing intellectually dishonest projections to cope.
And so, if my worldview doesn't account for an origin, it doesn't mean that it gives credibility to your worldview. That's not how that works.
Another straw man. I never said anything about your worldview accounting or not accounting for origin. I have no idea what the exact parameters of your worldview are, aside from your claim to atheism. I presented the argument as to why the origins paradox reasonably leads to the God concept, which you are not addressing. To the extent that your worldview is grounded in an atheistic perspective, you have provided no justification for maintaining such a position. I am still waiting for you to provide a single objection on the merits. That's how that works, my guy.
Third, there is no contradiction or paradox in the idea of infinity or the idea of an origin.
Yes, there is, and I explain exactly why a paradox is reached under both scenarios. That is, whether existence has or does not have a beginning. You're not making an argument by merely stating, no, there is not. You're just repeating the opposite and hoping nobody will notice. Did you even watch the video, bud?
Of something like time having a beginning. It may be counterintuitive, it may be difficult to comprehend at face value, but it isn't this paradox that you just claimed and didn't actually go into why that would be the case.
I spent the majority of the video explaining exactly why that is the case, to wit, why a paradox is reached when logically analyzing origins. Now you're not only dodging the argument in my video, but you're directly lying about what it says. Again, did you even watch the video, my guy? And no, it is not a question of counterintuitive or difficult to understand. Logical analysis of origins leads to paradox, as I explained in the video. That is qualitatively distinct from counterintuitive or difficult to understand. You're piling straw man on top of straw man and outright lying about your interlocutor's position. Are you so pathologically locked in your perspective that you choose to engage in these underhanded tactics just to feel better about having no valid rebuttal? Why do this? Why challenge me with these bare assertions? Why humiliate yourself like this? What's the point of this other than to pacify your inflamed ego?
The two options you provided, whether it's either there is a beginning or an infinite regress, are not the only options.
First off, I did not mention the term infinite regress. I said that the only options presented by logic are that existence has always existed, meaning it had no beginning, or that it had a beginning. Those are the only two options that logic presents us with. If you have a third option that nobody in the history of thought or philosophy has ever considered, please enlighten us. Secondly, you don't seem to realize that replacing infinite regress with circularity is far worse. As I explained in my video, A leads to B and then back to A, or in other words, a contradictory causal loop, which can be described as a circle. You completely sidestepped this and pretended that saying circle somehow resolves the origins paradox, when it does the exact opposite. Like, how do you think this is a valid counterpoint? I explain how the paradox is reached, and your response is to say the opposite, with zero reasoning. But again, whether you choose to use the term infinite regress or not has no bearing on the logic of my argument. In either scenario, beginning or no beginning, we reach a paradox.
There are many models of the universe that don't require either of those things. For example, think of a circle. A circle doesn't have a beginning point.
Correct. A circle does not have a beginning, which means that it falls into one of the two scenarios I mentioned in the video. Either it has a beginning or it doesn't. Seriously, did you even watch the video, buddy? You're spewing nonsense straw man that only affirm my argument's conclusions. If you posit a universe whose geometry or existence is circular, that is, you claim that it never had a beginning, then we reach a paradox. I not only mention exactly such a scenario in the video, but your circle example makes the logic of my argument even stronger. A leads to B and then back to A, or in other words, a circle. And that's not even considering the temporal paradoxes of a circular cosmological frame. The dual-sided arrow I use in the video is just a symbol to illustrate the difference between having a beginning and not having a beginning. It includes all scenarios without a beginning, such as a circle. Thank you for affirming my point. Like I said earlier, if you can present an origin scenario other than one having a beginning or not having a beginning, please do so. Your circle scenario falls squarely in the latter, no pun intended. Falsely claiming that it falls in neither of the scenarios I stated changes nothing. Also, just for the record, my argument primarily regarded existence and not simply the universe. This might seem like a trivial distinction, but its importance will become evident in a moment when I discuss your reference to a multiverse or a self-contained universe.
But it's also not a line that goes on forever. It's a circle.
So you first misinterpret the dual-sided arrow in the video as meaning only a line, and then you go on to use that misinterpretation to pretend that you have a cogent counterpoint. In other words, strawman. The dual-sided arrow is a symbol, my guy. It is meant to illustrate the difference between having a beginning and not having a beginning. Where did I say line? The arrow symbol includes your circle scenario because, as you state, a circle has no beginning point. Again, calling it a circle makes the logic of my argument even more apparent, because it more clearly presents a causal loop. The fact that you eventually loop back over prior positions is partly the reason the paradox occurs. As I mentioned in the video, A leads to B leads to A. You have no argument.
There are models of the universe that look at the universe as a self-contained reality of that sort. And so that would avoid either outcome that you were complaining about.
No, it wouldn't. It does not matter whether the universe is modeled as self-contained or not. The same origins paradox of existence is reached. If a self-contained universe had a beginning, we reach paradox. And if it had no beginning, we also reach paradox. I explained this in the video. You're not responding to my argument. You're scrambling to avoid it with tangential discussion of cosmological topology because you know that you have no substantive counter, but you're too much of a megalomaniac to admit it. As I stated before, the primary term I use is existence, not universe. I only used the term universe when discussing pantheism, since it facilitated exemplification of what pantheism is in that part of my argument. See, it's one thing to go on power trips during your lives, thinking you won arguments against randos whom you eventually block or boot, but it's an entirely different situation when you're debating against a rational position. Lastly on this point, I'm not sure what you mean by complaining. You keep using that word, but you don't seem to know what it means. Presenting a rational argument has nothing to do with complaining. On the other hand, dodging that argument and then lying about it to avoid acknowledging your lack of coherent response would probably qualify as a form of complaining. Don't do that, okay?
There are also ideas like the multiverse that would avoid either of the things that you said were the only options.
No, they wouldn't. The multiverse just shifts the question from the universe to the multiverse. It avoids nothing, and it is disgusting how intellectually dishonest you have to be to claim this. You're obviously somewhat intelligent to elect atheism over religion, notwithstanding your mental afflictions and anger issues, so you cannot possibly fail to realize that shifting the question from the universe to the multiverse resolves nothing. This is why I made the distinction earlier between existence and universe, which apparently went straight over your head. How profound does your megalomania have to be to put forward such deceit? This is in line with your deflection referencing a circle. Circular cosmological topology leads to the exact same paradox I mentioned in the video. You have no valid response, so you latch on to these semantic sophisms to pretend that you do. As I stated previously, learn to admit when you're wrong about something, okay?
Now, I agree with someone like Graham Opping, where I think there is a necessary foundation to reality. So I don't think that something came from nothing.
I don't care what you think is necessary or unnecessary. I care about your arguments, and thus far, you've provided nothing that even remotely weakens my position in the video. On the contrary, you've only affirmed my position.
I don't think nothing is a coherent concept.
Again, you're not addressing any part of my argument. I am very close to concluding that you did not even watch the video in full. I've explained to you why the concept of existential phenomena beyond our comprehension, that is, phenomena beyond logic, is rational. Using a fruit fly analogy, calculus or quantum mechanics are utterly incomprehensible to a fruit fly. By analogy, the concept of existential phenomena beyond our comprehension presents itself, and I explain how the origins paradox leads to this concept. If you believe that the concept of nothing is incoherent, then you are again implicitly affirming the conclusions in my video regarding the God concept.
But there is nothing about there being a necessary foundation that implies anything about time or anything even about causality in the way you're using it.
I explain why paradox is reached in the scenario of existence having a beginning, to wit, an alteration occurred without time, not to mention the implication of non-existence giving birth to existence. The causality issue also leads to paradox in the scenario of existence having no beginning, A leading to B leading to A, not to mention the aforementioned issue of existence without causality. You address none of this. Instead, you just ignore it and say, not the way you're using it. How is that an argument? What does that even mean? You explain and define nothing. Compare that to my argument. I define exactly what is meant by the term God. That is, a creationary force beyond logic that is the source of existence. Seriously, is this how you argue? Just pretend that your opponent is a straw man so you can punch him at will without opposition? Did you win a local debate contest or something and feel like you don't need to explain anything to us peasants? I mean, this is some grade A megalomania on display here.
You don't seem to understand that in physics, causality is an emergent feature, not a fundamental feature.
Now you're not only projecting your ignorance of physics, but again sidestepping my position. Try to understand whether or not you grant that causality is an emergent feature of existence, the same paradox is reached upon logical analysis of origins, leading to the notion of a force beyond logic. If it makes you feel better, you don't have to call this force God. Call it your foundational force. Oh wait, you already did, implying that you're really a theist who is simply arguing over the use of the word God, as opposed to the logic of the issue. This is beyond petty. If it makes you feel better, kiddo, you don't have to use the word God, because that is what all of this is about, right? Feeling better about yourself after a random nobody dismantled your entire existential integrity in 3 minutes. Also, not that it makes any difference to my argument, but I missed the part in physics class where it's explained how the feature of causality comes into existence. You're so intellectually dishonest that you're not only deflecting from my argument, but making up your own physics as you go along, just so you can maintain your existential integrity. And again, the hilarious part is that even if one grants causality being an emergent feature, it solves absolutely nothing as far as the origins paradox is concerned. You don't get to say, oh, the universe emerged from a foundational non-causal force, but I refuse to call that force God. You're a sophist, and now you're getting dragged up and down the proverbial field by someone who's got your number.
So that's another misconception you're projecting.
Projecting your projections onto your opponent is called meta-projection. Don't do that. Secondly, what misconception are you referring to? Where did I say that causality has to be emergent or non-emergent? In either case, logical analysis of origins leads to the same conclusion as in the video. You're deflecting with a red herring to avoid addressing my argument head-on. Why? Because you have no valid retort.
You keep saying that theism is the most reasonable explanation, but you've provided nothing to actually show that's the case.
Except that I provided a rational argument demonstrating exactly why theism is more reasonable than atheism. As we've seen thus far, you have provided nothing to counter this, and now you're projecting your lack of substantive opposition onto me to deflect, which is not surprising, given that my argument decimated your safe world comfort zone.
Other than strawmanning atheism and strawmanning scientific concepts and mathematical concepts like infinity.
Show me where I strawmanned atheism, scientific concepts, and mathematical concepts. I'll wait. Again, is this really what you do? Project your strawmanning of your opponent's position on top of outright lying and sprinkling in red herrings to distract the viewer from your intellectual dishonesty? Not to mention refusing to take accountability for your vile, nasty personal attacks? I mean, you must have known that you were eventually bound to run into someone who simply refuses to let your psychopathy slide. At no point did I strawman anything. You're making a bare assertion of strawmanning without providing a shred of argument to back it up. Like, this isn't elementary school debate. Your failure to understand scientific and mathematical concepts and your failure to understand your own perspective, atheism, does not mean that your opponent is strawmanning any of those things. If you have an actual argument or evidence to the contrary, please present it.
So you've not offered anything of value here.
Except that I have. My video demonstrates, which you apparently didn't watch to completion, that theism is a more reasonable election than atheism. Lying about my argument and projecting your strawmanning has zero value, but more power to you if that's what you need to hear so you can sleep at night. Remember, nobody forced you to engage me. You chose to do so. Take your L's maturely and with dignity instead of thrashing around and throwing a temper tantrum over losing an argument. There's nothing wrong with losing an argument. It doesn't make me better than you. Rather, it gives you opportunity to learn from the discussion. Take that opportunity instead of attacking people in hopes of reconstituting your shattered worldview. Alright, so that was his first video on the issue. Let's move on to his second.
This is a classic case of projection.
Except it's not, unless you're referring to yourself. You came in with pathological aggression and then could not handle when I returned it tenfold upon you. When your petty insults of delusional and weakling, among many others, failed, you decided to implicitly threaten my life with "you should not exist." Perfect. By the way, those comments you're scrolling through behind you, the ones numbered 1 through 40, are my refutation of your video rebuttal in the comments section of that video. You realized you had no response on the merits, so you projected yourself onto me, lying to yourself so you could justify your failure to respond. Then you blocked me and ran away. Well, now you get a full-scale evisceration of your insanity, point by point, for anyone with an internet connection to see. Like I said, you're going to learn. This is for everyone. Everyone you've abused on here to gratify your miserable self. It ends here.
This guy claims that he triggered me, or that I was so upset that he destroyed my worldview.
Yep, that's exactly what I claim, as I have detailed thus far. I claim this because that's what happened. My argument essentially broke your head, leading you to a spiral of fury and spite. You have no argument, so now you're posting videos that have nothing to do with the merits. And again, the humiliating irony here is that you're scrolling through my 40-part decimation of your garbage rebuttal, desperately trying to convince yourself that you didn't get royally trounced on a public forum.
Meanwhile, he has no idea what he's talking about. He imagines paradoxes that don't exist.
You're just saying no, you're wrong over and over and over again, hoping that people who watch this will be fooled into thinking you're making a cogent argument. I explained the origins paradox in detail in the video, bub. Your refusal to address it, or perhaps your failure to understand it, is not really my concern. But if you want to apologize for your incivility and start fresh, I'll be happy to explain it to you on your live. Until then, keep projecting your imaginations onto me. You're only affirming the argument in my video. Origins paradox exists, and it leads to the God concept. My argument establishes this. I realize this upsets you. Go talk to your therapist about all the things in reality that upset you. I'm not here to make you feel all warm and fuzzy inside, especially when you come at me with demented hostility.
I provided him with other models of the universe that completely bypass any issues of origin and infinite regress.
No, you did not provide any such thing. You mentioned the possibility of a circular cosmological topology, which leads to the exact same paradox discussed in the video. As I already explained on numerous occasions, your example of a circle actually makes my argument stronger, because the causal loop that occurs in a circle topology is far clearer. A leads to B and then back to A. You already acknowledged yourself that a circle topology has no beginning, which is one of the two scenarios of existence available to us through logical analysis. Not only do you not have any argument, but your statements have cemented my conclusions. But please, keep lying about the merits of your retort and projecting your immense lack of education. I guess you'll probably be able to fool at least some of your followers to keep listening to you drone on about nothing in particular. Learn to admit when you're wrong, my guy.
He ignored it and wrote about 60, 70 comments.
No, I did not ignore anything. I responded directly on your video that your circle example fits perfectly within the scenario I discussed. That is, a paradoxical causal loop where A leads to B and then back to A, otherwise known as a circle. You not only ignored that, but then pretended that it somehow supports your position. And now you're projecting your deflection onto me, all while ironically scrolling through my initial rebuttal in the background, refusing to address it. Perfect. And my 60 to 70 comments were all in response to hundreds of your toxic ad hominem and puerile attacks, which you deleted before recording this video to misrepresent your behavior and dodge accountability. I mean, this is next level derangement on display here. As I stated earlier, your brand of unhinged vehemence has no place in civil discourse. Therefore, you're liable to receive far more than 60 to 70 comments if you continue with your harassment. Some people would probably just ignore and write you off as a kook, and I imagine that's largely whom you've been up against this far. If you don't want to receive more comments, then run away again. Nobody is forcing you to read or reply to anything. You're complaining about a reasonable reaction to your behavior so you can deflect from your megalomania and psychopathy, made all the more hilarious by your failure to realize the absurdity of such a complaint. You post hundreds of psychotic attacks and aspersions only to then whine about your opponent tearing you a new one.
Of just attacks and insults and...
Keep projecting, megalomaniac. Kid calls me delusional and a weakling after losing the substantive debate, amongst hundreds of other aspersions, only to react surprised that I returned his aggression in spades. You can apparently dish it out, but when somebody takes you to task, all of a sudden you start crying and complaining about being attacked. Poor little atheist playing the victim. How many people have you maligned and disparaged to satisfy your miserable hunger for superiority, even going to the length of mocking the mentally handicapped? If you can control your mental affliction, you probably probably should not be entering charged debates. Stay in your live where you can play dictator and abuse anyone who disagrees with you without consequence. Complaining about having your attacks and insults met with counterattacks is amusing, but it does not remotely excuse your behavior, nor does it have anything to do with your failure to provide a valid counter-argument. You realized that I was not backing down, so you got enraged and called me delusional. Right. Anyone who crushes your arguments is delusional. Perfect.
Completely delusional crap that doesn't actually address my arguments.
More breathtaking projection. The megalomania is strong in this one. I addressed your arguments point by point. When you realized that you held the losing position, you flew into a rage and started spewing ad hominem attack after ad hominem attack, calling me delusional, weakling, etc. Then you not only vomited up veiled threats against my life through direct message, but you blocked me so you could delete your comments and conceal your reprehensible behavior. Not cool, buddy. Not cool at all.
He thinks logic leads to contradiction, which is one of the stupidest things I've ever heard in this app.
This is priceless. I explained the origins paradox in the video, and your response is, that is stupid. And then you have the gall to claim that I am ignoring your arguments? What is going on in your head? Do you know who you sound like? The kooky religiosos who call into the atheist experience only to claim that the rational arguments provided by Matt Dillahunty and company are stupid. You do realize that calling an argument stupid after failing to present any valid retort against it is basically a form of ad hominem, right? Logical analysis of origins does lead to contradiction, as I explained in the video. Calling this fact stupid to pacify the existential crisis you're going through changes nothing. But please, keep putting on a show for your audience. This is going to be a testament to mental affliction and disturbance in the atheist community, one that I sincerely hope will lead you to better your life and character.
It's just embarrassing altogether.
Yep, flying off in an enraged conniption after losing a debate on your worldview is embarrassing. Call me delusional and a weakling some more while you continue ignoring my points and calling everything you dislike stupid. Oh, and don't forget to threaten my life again and then lie about it. Maybe sprinkle in some more racist and ableist comments while you're at it. Are you really this low of a person to think these sorts of theatrics are remotely appropriate?
So again, I've done this many times before. If you're watching this, come onto my live.
How? After you told me I shouldn't exist and blocked me? As I've demonstrated already, you've spewed passive-aggressive projections many times before after losing a debate, but that only exacerbates the incivility of your behavior. Again, if you apologize for your insults and threats, I will consider coming onto your live. I don't mind schooling you in real time, though it would be a pointless endeavor at this juncture. The burden is on you to restore civility, since you broke it first with insults of delusional and weakling. You don't get to engage in such vitriol and then pretend that everything is peachy keen. Take your L's and learn when you're wrong about something.
Set up a time to come to my YouTube channel. I would love nothing more than to expose your ignorance to the world. Thank you.
Given that you're getting the thrashing of a lifetime over your untenable worldview and disgraceful threats and attacks, I'm not sure how you're exposing anything other than your own demented pathology. If it makes you feel better to just keep reversing reality, similarly to how you just kept screaming no, no, no against my arguments, go for it. Make no mistake, however, this dissection will be posted on both TikTok and YouTube so that any rational person can bear witness to your disturbance. There are consequences for your frenzied incivility. Others may have allowed you carte blanche up to this point without repercussions. Not this time. Alright, that was his second video on the issue. As you can see, it's a hodgepodge of more deranged projection and gaslighting. Now here's his third video, continuing in the same vein.
So once again, all you're doing is projecting.
How many times do you think you need to repeat that before it becomes true? Kiddo, you came onto my video with unhinged aggression and attacks. When you realized that I wasn't backing down, you went absolutely insane, even spewing veiled threats of violence against my life through direct message. Now you're projecting your projections in hopes of convincing yourself and your audience of your delusions. Priceless. Again, you're certainly adept at playing the victim to avoid accountability, but you unfortunately picked the wrong person this time. Use this as a learning experience. When megalomaniacs like you get crushed in argument, which is what happened here, they refuse to accept it. Instead, they attack and project. In your case, my video dismantled your worldview to such a profound degree that you imploded into a nervous breakdown, even copy-pasting my vocabulary over and over again in the comments. And when you realized that I wasn't going to let you gratify yourself by ignoring you, you blocked me. Beautiful.
Okay, I'm not the one that left 60 comments between one video and the other and sent me novels of DMs.
My 60 comments were in response to hundreds of your comments attacking me, including a torrent of DMs about how I shouldn't exist. You lost the argument on the merits and went bonkers. Now you're doing your best to reverse everything in some futile attempt at coping with the existential crisis you're going through.
Whining and complaining and making up false things.
What complaining? What false things? You're posting video after video about me complaining about my comments, which were all in response to your attacks and threats against me. Try to understand something, Pumpkin. When you attack someone with deranged aggression, you're going to get a forceful response in return. If that makes you feel bad, then here's an idea. Don't attack people after you lose a debate. Learn from your loss and improve your character and arguments, okay? Like, how deranged do you have to be to call someone delusional, weakling, etc. after losing a critical debate? Not to mention telling them that they shouldn't exist, only to then complain that your opponent returned fire. You're like a belligerent drunk who starts harassing people and then gets upset when the bouncer kicks him out of the club. Like I said, you seem to have plenty of experience playing the victim when things don't go your way. Not this time.
I already took apart your argument completely in 3 minutes.
No, you didn't. Though it's amusing how you have to keep repeating the self-soothing mantra to yourself to maintain what little sanity you have left. Not only did your rebuttal utterly fail to address my argument, but I did you the courtesy of disintegrating it part by part, including exposing how your mention of a circle only affirmed my position.
You have no valid defense, so now you're desperately trying to convince yourself that you do. Otherwise, you quite literally would not be able to sleep at night. That's fine. I have no problem with what you need to do to mend your fractured worldview, but the fact remains that you have no defense for continuing to label yourself an atheist, much less justify your man-child temper tantrum. If this upsets you, well, tough luck. Nobody forced you to come here and engage me, bud. I asked you numerous times to apologize and to stop posting harassing comments on my videos through your backup account. You refused. Consequences, Mr. ATHEIST, they can be a pain in the neck, huh?
Okay, now, your lack of understanding of the response is not my problem.
Pretending that your opponent doesn't understand your response to avoid admitting that you lost an argument is intellectually dishonest. Not only did I dismantle and refute every part of your rebuttal, but I did not even need to do so, given that you did not actually address my argument. Instead, you strawmanned and deflected so you could trick your ego into thinking you have a meritorious counter, which you don't. And that, my guy, is your problem, not mine.
There's nothing about you that caused me to have any kind of triggering.
Have you ever heard of denialism, bud? You went absolutely ballistic after getting crushed on the merits. Hundreds of comments, torrents of DMs, multiple videos, veiled threats against my life, etc., etc. But sure, you weren't triggered. I mean, if you say you weren't triggered, then it must be true, right? If you say you tore apart my argument, that also must be true, right? Claims equals evidence, right? Who needs logic and evidence? Just make the claim and pretend that's sufficient. You're the king of the world, presiding in front of your audience. How dare someone challenge you? This is just gold. Like, the storm of insanity behind your eyes is palpable.
Experience. You didn't shake my worldview even remotely.
Right, which is why you went World War II on me with your attacks, videos, DMs, threats, projections, etc. And now you're claiming my worldview is just fine. Sure, kid, after having your rebuttal systematically torn apart, your worldview is just fine. Repeat that to yourself 100 times each night before you doze off. By the way, for the record, I don't care about your worldview or whether it has been shattered, but if you're going to come here and attack me after I politely invited you to check out my video, I'm not going to sit there and take your abuse. This is for everyone, all the people you've abused on here or YouTube, all of them.
You didn't make me angry. Okay, there's nothing about you that has any effect on me whatsoever.
Denialism is a hell of a drug, huh? Video after video, attack after attack, streams of DMs, veiled threats against my life, blocking me so I can't respond to your videos or comments, etc., etc.
etc., etc.
And then using your backup account to harass and provoke me. But sure, I've had no effect on you whatsoever. I feel sympathy for the 1 or 2 people who follow you that are actually going to believe your delusional self-soothing nonsense.
Other than I find you at best amusing.
Do you always vomit up unhinged attacks, threats, and denialism against those you find amusing? You're so desperate to convince yourself that you didn't just have your worldview stomped on that you have to self-soothe with these painfully transparent public declarations. Hey, everybody, I am totally okay. This guy Bart is just amusing to me. Everything is fine. This is why I posted the comment you're replying to here. Given your behavior, you undoubtedly need to be medicated. What you're doing is not okay, my guy, even for TikTok.
That's, and more than anything, I find you sad, to be honest.
Okay, sad. Well, which one is it? Sad or amusing? Or both? You know what's actually sad? Losing an argument and throwing a temper tantrum over it, only to then project that temper tantrum to avoid accountability. You're an adult, buddy, probably in your 20s somewhere, right? Like, how do you think any of this is appropriate behavior? How? This would be humiliating for a high schooler or even a middle schooler.
Because I find, for example, you saying that I threatened you. Where did I threaten you?
In a DM where you stated you should not exist, a veiled threat. If I knew you were going to make video after video about me or harass me again and again through your backup account, I would have saved it before you deleted it. I also love how you projected your threats onto me, falsely claiming in various comments that I threatened you. If I had threatened you, you would have mentioned it here, but you didn't. Why? Because you're lying and projecting, and you keep inventing new falsehoods as you go along.
I didn't threaten you at all. Nothing I said was a threat.
Telling someone that they should not exist would probably qualify as threatening language for most people. You, being a delusional man-child, apparently don't understand this, just like you don't understand that circular cosmological topology falls into the category of no beginning, which is exactly what I discuss in the video.
I said, why are you scared to debate me live?
Try to understand something, bud. When you attack and threaten people after losing a debate, it doesn't exactly entice them to debate you live, where you'll most likely degrade into the same hostilities. I already made it clear that any live debate must first be preceded by your apology and restoration of civility, which you have refused. Moreover, why would I want to debate you live when I already dismantled your rebuttal? You have no defense and no argument. You don't even understand how a circular existential framework leads to causal paradox. It would be a pointless endeavor, serving only to bolster your ego in front of your audience. And let's not forget that you blocked my primary account, so how can I even find your channel to debate you? But anyways, keep telling yourself that I am scared if that's what you need to cope with the situation. I wouldn't even have posted this series if you had simply apologized and moved on.
If I'm so dumb and you can school me so easily, then come find me and debate me live.
I can't. You ran away and blocked me when you realized that I wasn't backing down to your vehemence and gaslighting, plus all the other reasons I just mentioned regarding the pointlessness of a live debate. You have no argument. If you're going to repeat the same deflections and straw men, why would I want to go live with you and have you scream and attack me?
How is that a threat? That makes no sense. You don't make any sense at all.
I never said your call for a live debate was a threat, kiddo. I said that telling someone they should not exist is a threat. Keep strawmanning, though. Also, as I mentioned earlier, you projected your threats onto me, falsely claiming that I had threatened you. If that had actually been the case, you would unquestionably have mentioned that here, but you didn't, because you're projecting and lying and making up nonsense as you go along. Like I said, medicated.
So, again, if I was so afraid of your intellect, why would I ask you to join my lives and debate me in front of my whole audience?
To save face, which is a classic tactic to avoid acknowledging losing a debate. You know you have no argument, but since you're a megalomaniac, you can't bring yourself to admit it. So you act tough and beg for a live debate so you can mislead your audience about what occurred, not to mention your ego. And by the way, what is this obsession with your audience? You're constantly seeking superficial validation to make up for your failures on the merits. Who the hell rants about their audience on TikTok as if that somehow gives them greater validity?
And that's just really sad.
I'm not afraid because I find you completely unimpressive in every sense of the word.
Right. You posted hundreds of toxic comments, sent waves of DMs, threatened me, and made multiple videos for someone you find unimpressive. Geez, pal, if this is how you react to losing a debate with an unimpressive opponent, what do you do with the impressive ones? Start World War III or something?
So if you ever decide that you want to put your money where your mouth is, you'll know where to find me.
How? After you threatened and blocked me? You lost the debate and ran away, my guy. Your rebuttal was methodically shredded. So now you're desperately trying to save face by begging for a live debate and deflecting with irrelevant idioms. Like, when has my money not been where my mouth is? I presented the strongest possible argument for belief in God, and you failed to provide any cogent counterpoint. As I've already stated, your rebuttal only affirmed the conclusions in my video. So explain to me why I would want to debate you live when A, you have no argument, and B, you attacked and threatened me with hundreds of unhinged ad hominems.
So far, you're showing me that you're just like every other shit talker on this app. You talk shit and then you don't back it up.
So let me get this straight. You get your rebuttal systematically dissected, and your response is you're a shit talker who doesn't back it up. My guy, you need to talk to a mental health professional. The level of delusion and denialism you're exhibiting is pathological. You know you have no argument. If I were just some random shit talker, as you put it, you wouldn't be obsessed with making yourself feel better about getting your worldview fractured by a 3-minute video on theism. Stop damaging the atheist community with your tantrums and get some help. You're almost making the nutty religiosos look respectable by comparison. Alright, that was his third video. Almost done. Here's the latest rant he's posted on this issue so far, along with my concluding remarks.
Well, here's part 2 of the same guy accusing me of being psychologically unstable.
I am accusing you of being psychologically unstable because that is what your behavior indicates. Put yourself in my shoes for a moment, pal. I politely invited you to come check out my video on theism. You came in with unbridled aggression, quickly devolving into open aspersions and attacks against my person, sending me torrents of DMs, some threatening, and uploading video after video obsessing, projecting, and gaslighting. And why? Because you're a megalomaniac who cannot cope with losing. You have to dominate and control everything you engage in, and if you don't get your way, you get abusive. I can only imagine the trap that awaits anyone who enters into a relationship with you. I mean, talk about cruel and unusual punishment.
And projecting and all these things, and being triggered, meanwhile leaving me novels and novels of text through my DMs, complaining and making things up.
I love the demented absurdity of attacking and provoking someone through DMs, only to then complain about getting a vigorous response. But given your depraved aspersions against me, every word I wrote, whether in the comments or DMs, was perfectly warranted. If anything, I didn't thrash you enough for your incivility. You could have blocked me at any time if you wanted to cease communication, but you didn't. Instead, you not only kept firing psychotic drivel against me, but you used your backup account, @cease2know2, to continue the harassment afterward.
And now you're complaining and crying about having your hostile energy returned tenfold upon you, desperately projecting and playing the victim after realizing you made an epic mistake? Kid, you have no argument against anything here, whether it is about the merits of my video or the nature of my communications with you. You picked the wrong person to try your song and dance on this time, and now you're getting exposed for your entire audience and world to see. Also, I love how you're purposely not showing all the DMs you sent me, which are the ones I am replying to, mostly because you deleted them before recording your video. You did the same thing with the comments, intentionally concealed hundreds of crazed comments so you can escape accountability. Perfect. Brilliant. You truly are the shining beacon of intellectual honesty and reason. But please continue humiliating yourself by reversing everything and playing the little atheist victim. Continue complaining about getting torn apart in debate and then getting taken to school over your infantile temper tantrum. Continue projecting and fabricating nonsense about me making stuff up. What have I made up? Please enlighten us. When you attack people unjustly, you're liable to get a forceful reaction against your behavior, and you have no basis to complain about that, given that it was your behavior that precipitated it. Got that? By the way, remember when you kept projecting your threats onto me, claiming that I had actually threatened you through DMs? If I had, you would have brought it up in your videos, since you said you had recorded and screenshotted it. Nobody threatened you, kid. You, on the other hand, told me I shouldn't exist. Like I said, you truly are a beacon for intellectual honesty and reason. Your toxicity is precisely what runs through TikTok and damages the experiences of others. I politely invited you to see my video, and you came in with insane aggression and hostility. On what planet do you think that's okay or appropriate? Explain that to me. Again, learn to take your losses with dignity and maturity. You brought this response on yourself by persisting in harassing and antagonizing me, and now you have to live with the rest of your natural-born life knowing that this video is forever out in the ether. It gives me no special pleasure to know that you're going through an existential meltdown over being refuted, but I am not about to let your unhinged virulence go by without answer. Maybe others would, but you happen to pick the wrong person this time. Unfortunate. If you apologize to me and to the TikTok community for your hostility and veiled threats against my life, then I will consider giving you the opportunity to debate me live. Until then, your challenge to that effect carries no force, since you have failed to restore civility. Lastly, @WeDoFail, you are one of the individuals pouring fuel on the dumpster fire started by @CeaseToKnow in the comments before you blocked me. Pro tip, next time you enter a debate about theism and atheism, make sure you know the difference between deism and theism. It is one thing to be hostile and aggressive to cover up your lack of sound points, but an entirely different sort of self-humiliation to do so while ignorant of the basic concepts underpinning the discussion. Capiche? Now stay down and slither away into @CeaseToKnow's echo chamber where you can validate each other to your heart's content. For people that are supposed
supposed to be far more rational than the typical religious barking, you come off as intensely narrow-minded. And as for you, Mr. ATHEIST, I strongly suggest you do not continue this conflict. Stay down and lick your wounds. I'm sure whatever country you live in has criminal laws against communicating threats via electronic means, not to mention such acts clearly violating TikTok's community guidelines. You may have deleted your DM, but no doubt that TikTok has it archived, along with all of your previous racist, ableist, and all-around nutty comments. Take your L's maturely. Learn from them. You have no valid counter to the reason argument. I dissected your rebuttal in its entirety. If you ever muster up the courage to unblock me and apologize for your incivility, I invite you to a friendly exchange. Until then, reflect on your transgressions and consider an anger management course.